Everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. I can't believe I'm in a Zoom room with some of the legends in this call, who have been so foundational in the feminism that I've been trying to build over the last couple years in my graduate work. So I didn't know what to do, so I made a little bit of a presentation just to kind of go over a little bit of my steps in the journey. Hopefully, I will lay it out sequentially, and we can talk about any questions as we go along or after. So I'm going to share this. Okay, so this seems a little formal for tonight, so I'm gonna go through it pretty quickly. Um, so I am a PhD candidate at New York University. I'm in the developmental psychology program. I study how gender attitudes influence our identities and relationships and how that changes over time. So developmental scientists are really interested in change over time, particularly longitudinal work. And that is a little bit of what I do. So I'm just going to tell you about a couple of steps that I've taken, and then think about what I'm doing next, which is kind of what I'm trying to figure out right now. So I started at Loyola, and I came from a background where feminism and intersectional perspectives on gender and race were extremely foreign to me from the upbringing that I had. And I was a student in my sociology classes and my psychology courses who was arguing against some of the knowledge that I was learning. It was antithetical to my upbringing in a lot of ways. And Dr. Conradi and Dr. Carlucci were really some of my first guides in exploring a deeper feminism. So my work with them, it led to two independent projects. One of which Dr. K and I published together, and their advice and my growing interest also led me to do an internship at the National Women's Studies Association. I got to hold books for Bell Hooks while she was at a book signing, which was like one of my most memorable moments in that time. But I had a really kind of like rough introduction to feminism because I was really resistant to it, and now thinking about gender and race is really what I do for a living and what I want to continue doing with my life. So I have a huge sense of gratitude at the guidance that I was able to receive in a way that was open to all the ways that I had to grow, which were a lot at that time, and I'm still working on that. So this is the study that Dr. Conradi and I published, called How Confident Are Confidants? Confidants being the people that victims or survivors of sexual assault tell when something has happened. And we were able to create quite a stir at Loyola with this project, in terms of the administration's reaction to it, realizing that all the efforts that they were doing to increase students' sexual assault related knowledge was making people feel a lot more confident, but wasn't actually giving them the skills to address an incident when it occurs. So that was a really great project that we worked on. And I left Loyola with a really strong sense of wanting to pursue questions that were at the heart of gender and race, but I just didn't know which questions, and I didn't have a mature sense of my research interests either. So I started a master's program where I could really develop the hard skills and the statistical knowledge to pursue these questions that I was forming. And my mentor, Deborah Best, and I started looking at a lot of different topics. One of those was this topic of self-silencing in women and girls, and this idea that kind of took over feminism in the 80s and 90s, this idea that girls, particularly adolescent girls, go through this self-silencing when they are about 12, 13 in a way that they didn't when they were younger, where they silenced their thoughts and opinions and emotions. And I really became attracted to this idea, especially as a white woman who felt this identified with my story a lot. And so we started testing this hypothesis quantitatively, which hadn't been done, of do girls go through this change at this age, and is it connected to their views about gender? So because gender norms teach us that women are generally more submissive, more silent, and want to create harmony in their relationships, we wanted to see if this idea actually persisted across different groups of girls. We found that both girls and boys self-silence. Self-silencing wasn't specific to gender, but it was really located in white girls. And so the story that my field was telling about girls was really a story that was very much located in whiteness, where the girls of color in my work were telling me that this narrative really didn't fit their experience. So my mentor and I are trying to make a more intersectional field of girls' development. So that's sort of what my master's thesis was, which basically my master's thesis, all the data collected became a brief report in the Journal of Adolescence. And then we've also done some work on how gender stereotypes vary across cultures. And generally, like the takeaway that I've gotten from this work is that gender attitudes are incredibly varying. We often talk about an overlying hegemonic femininity or masculinity, but there's so much variation in how gender is experienced that when we talk about gender stereotypes as a general phenomenon, we don't often think about all of the nuances and idiosyncrasies that different groups in different cultures and contexts have access to. So that's really the question that I started to explore in my master's is what gender narratives do different groups have access to, and realizing that my own gender narratives were so based in the femininity that I had access to. So I left this experience and I knew I wanted to investigate how masculinity and femininity develop, particularly in young people, and how our accommodation to these ideologies, or even better, our resistance to the ideologies, affects our identities and relationships. So I want to know how gender gets personal. I want to know how it goes from the macro context out there in culture to our individual personal lives, which is sort of why I've stayed in psychology, because it's so central to investigating the individual. So these are some of the projects I've been working on in my PhD. Like I said, I'm at NYU. I work with Niobe Way. She's my advisor. So I've been investigating these questions of variation in gender attitudes in different samples and in different contexts with different research teams. Some recent projects. One, we look at how mothers' gender beliefs influence or predict adolescents' grades, which we saw some really interesting things where moms who believed in really strong gender stereotypes ended having boys who did really great in math, and girls who did really well in language, but boys who are less engaged in school, and girls who are more engaged in school, because it's this idea that they really care about school, they're super conscientious, and boys that caring about school is feminine. And then we started to kind of diversify our understanding of how gender is understood across cultures, looking at large global samples, particularly within masculinity, and thinking about how men's understanding of the gender equality movement differs across countries. So this is some of the work that I've been focusing on. None of this work is my dissertation. That's what I currently basically sit in this apartment and do all day, is trying to finish my dissertation and finish this long process up. But these are some of the projects that I've been really grateful to work on with some of my collaborators here in New York. But the very best thing I get to do is not the research, it's that I've been able to teach, which is something that I was able, my first example of seeing gender taught was really seeing Dr. Carlucci do it. And now I get to teach 100 students at Brooklyn College the psychology of gender. And here's a picture of some of my students who I teach, and we actually just had class earlier today. So what I learned in the minor and the foundations of feminism that I was building and the work that I was doing with Dr. Carlucci and Dr. Conradi are the things that I've built into my teaching and my research. They're really the foundations of my thinking. So recently I've become a little bit more interested in how I can start expanding things outside of research and academia. I've been doing some consulting work for journalists who are covering any issue that is at the intersection of race and gender. I've been doing work on women's electability that I was doing during the 2020 election. I've been writing for Teen Vogue, which has been really fun, talking about masculinity on TikTok and fun topics like that. So that's mostly what I've been up to. I don't really know what's next. I'm thinking about postdoc positions, and I'm working on my current project that I'm working on that builds off my dissertation is called How to Build a White Girl. And it's about how society tends to build white girls to be oppressed oppressors, and how white women can build their feminism to be more in line with the values that they claim. So this is the project that I'm working on now. This is my amazing lab group, my collaborators who are my friends and colleagues, and that's my contact information if you want to keep chatting, but we can also just chat here. So that is all I have.
I think it's just really intimidating to be an undergraduate student and hear like how amazing their careers are. And it's really inspiring, but in terms of questions, it's a little scary.
They don't bite.
Could any of you maybe speak to that transition a bit? Like the moment you're graduating?
It looks more put together than it is. Like I make it look like I think we all make it look like it's linear, but really like it's like all this. It's like, am I going to drop out of this program? Do I think anything original or good? Do I have what it takes to do this? So like you will always feel like a seedling, and you'll always look at people and be like, oh my gosh, they're the full tree. But where you are right now, like in this minor, is the perfect pot to grow in. And I think, even Megan and Matt and myself certainly still feel like little seedlings in so many ways, and have tons of doubt along the journey. And I think it was actually, it was Professor DiDonato who told me, I asked her if she, like how she felt about doing her PhD when I was considering it. And she said, if you don't think about like dropping out, or that you have no idea what you're doing, then you're doing something wrong. And that has been so true as I've been along this journey, and all of that intimidation and insecurity. If you're not thinking that, I think that something's a little weird.